Citi, obviously, important global bank, both in the institutional work that we do and the consumer work that we do. And we've had a chief innovation officer for quite some time now. I'm actually the second in line. I think chief innovation officer really speaks to how important we think it is to have a group at the bank who is accelerating our progress, who's sort of nudging forward and trying to make sure that we bring the outside in. We're not just thinking within the four metaphorical walls of Citi, but really thinking about how do we bring in outside trends, outside ideas in order to propel not just our company forward, but to create value for our clients, to create effectiveness for our employees. So it's been something we've been focused on for quite some time, and we think it's important for us and for the industry, frankly. Citi Ventures is a group that has been focused, like I said, on thinking outside first and then bringing that in. So we have a number of different groups as part of Citi Ventures. As you might imagine, part of it is our venture capital or our equity investing group for the company. So we've got a global team that focuses on investing in fintechs and commerce and payments, things that you would expect, but also, Lynn, things like cybersecurity, data, human resources tech, prop tech, reg tech. So it's quite a big footprint in terms of how we think about investing. And then you may have learned last year we launched a fund called the Impact Fund, and that's really focused on how do we make sure from an ESG point of view and from an equity perspective we're supporting those companies as well. Then the second part of Citi Ventures is an internal incubator. We call it D10X. D10X stands for Discovering Exponentially Better Solutions for Our Clients. So what we realized long ago is that entrepreneurs have great ideas about how they want to change the world, but our employees do too. It's just that we work in a highly regulated environment where employees can't just come to work and say, I want to try something new today. That's a little bit like if you're going into surgery and your surgeon's saying, oh, Lynn, I'd like to try something new. And you would say to her, no, thank you. Just do the thing that you've done already 1,000 times that works. And of course, that's what clients come to a bank for. So when we created D10X, we created it as a way for our employees to explore and validate their ideas while introducing zero incremental risk to the bank. And through D10X, I should mention, we've launched dozens and dozens of products and features. We've spun out multiple companies from Citi where we thought there was more value to the ecosystem external to Citi than inside, but really involved many thousands of employees in bringing their own ideas forward. And then third part of Citi Ventures I run is a group called the Studio. And the Studio is really focused on economic vitality and what would it mean if you could reimagine banking? So I'll give you just one example. There are many, but one example is, on the retail side of our business, banks think about the money that you have. Do you want to spend it? Do you want to save it? Do you want to loan against it? Right. But they don't think so much about what most people think about, which is how much money can I earn? So last year, almost exactly a year ago, we launched a platform called Worthy, which is all about your own worth. How do you figure out what skills you have and what skills you might acquire in order to allow you to earn more income? So kind of bridging that gap of, we know a lot of people are trying to upskill or reskill. Just in the US alone, $1.7 trillion of unpaid student debt says we know people are trying, but they can't always make the connection of what skills do I have and where do I live and work and how could I make more money? So Worthy kind of closes that last mile and helps you see not only what skills you might acquire, but how that could help you to earn more money. And then I'll just mention, in addition to Citi Ventures, I also run Citi Productivity, which is a team that's focused on taking those same capabilities that I just talked about and really turning them inward to Citi. So how do we make the employee experience better? How do we ensure that our employees are as effective as they can be? We have focused always at Citi Ventures on putting the entrepreneur first. We think this is really important. We're interested in companies where we can help entrepreneurs to scale efficiently and effectively. And that means not just putting money into the company, it also means making sure that there's something that we can offer from Citi that could be helpful as these companies are growing. So that might be that ultimately we become a client of a startup, but it might also be that a startup is interested in geographic expansion, and Citi obviously operates in, over 100 countries on the ground around the world. So our experience with the regulatory environment or, the local landscape might be helpful to a startup. So we're really focused on companies that we can help them grow. Lynn, we're quite stage agnostic. And why is that? We're not looking for only seed stage deals or only late stage deals. We're trying to find companies that it's the moment in time when we can be most helpful to them. Sometimes if a company is very early and it's found product market fit early on, we can be helpful very early. Other times we tend to invest a little bit later, but really what we want to make sure is that when we're on the cap table of a company, it's a company that we think we can help them to grow effectively. In terms of check size, typically we write between 3 and 10 million US, but you can imagine on the seed stage, we often write a little bit smaller, and we are in some late stage companies where we've invested more as well. In terms of bringing outside things in, we, as you might imagine, work really closely with our business unit leaders and our functional leaders. And we brought a number of technologies in where it's external startups that have started something, but we're now partnered with them to make a new offering for our clients. So for example, we're investors in and partners with a company called High Radius. And High Radius powers something at Citi called Smart Match. You can go online and look at thousands of articles about payments, but actually it turns out that receivables are really complicated for companies because then you have to match the invoice. It can be really expensive, paper heavy thing to do. So High Radius and Smart Match really help kind of solve that problem for clients. And I think that's really critical. We look for companies, whether it's internal innovation or external innovation, we're looking for companies that solve a client pain point. In terms of things that we've done internal and then spun out, as I mentioned, it goes both ways. So we created a company a couple of years ago called Proximity. Proximity was the idea of a couple of guys who worked in our operations in our custody group and understood how challenging proxy voting was. So if you're a shareholder of any company, probably twice a year, once a year, you get a ballot in the mail, and it's a long ballot. And unlike the elections where the local newspaper might tell you who everybody is and where everybody stands, you don't really get much in the way of guidance. But as a shareholder, as a part of good corporate governance, you are allowed to vote your shares. And then the company, obviously, during the general meeting, takes those votes. It's a very paper-based process. And because of that, lots of votes get lost. Lots of votes never make it in time. And so John and Dean realized that this is really a weak point in corporate governance. And they built Proximity, a platform that in near real time allows shareholders to vote their shares. And of course, well, that's a pain point for an individual shareholder. Imagine if you're an asset manager and you manage shares for thousands of clients in tens of thousands of positions, it becomes almost an overwhelming amount of paperwork. So whether we're thinking about bringing the outside in, or we're thinking about using our understanding of where clients have pain points or challenges in order to solve something, really we're always focused on how do we fix something, how do we make it better through innovation.